too. Catherine, thank you for that lovely introduction, and thank you all for being here. It's such a pleasure to join you tonight and talk about social media and technology. How's the sound of my voice? Is it okay? It's not too loud for you? I speak for a living and I speak as a hobby, and so I basically do not stop talking. Really, even once I'm in bed, there's still some ongoing conversations happening there. So my voice by this time of the day is quite exhausted. So thank you for understanding with me needing to boom my voice out there. I am trying to protect it at the advice of a speech pathologist who heard me speaking once and went, "Do you have vocal nodules? Do you need to do something about that voice?" So thank you so much. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And I certainly hope that tonight will provide you with a framework. So what I mean by a framework is I'm not about to give you a cookbook approach on how to support your children through this whole new age of social media and device and technology use. You are the best expert for your family. You know your children better than anybody else. So what I'm going to provide you with is knowledge around what the evidence has shared with us, what I try to encourage the families with whom I work to engage in order to support the psychological health of their children. But it is always different for every family, and it is crucial you are continually going back into your intuition about what is best for your child, because all of our children are different, and across that spectrum of children, some children need more technology use than others, and some children aren't as impacted by technology use as others. So it is really important to me that tonight you do not see me as an expert, just somebody who works with young people, and I certainly speak on this topic, and I'm sharing with you as much knowledge I can in the short amount of time we have. And after that, you sit down and you have a good think about which parts were valuable for your family and how you're going to interact and engage with this framework to make it work for your family. The other thing is, really, it would be so lovely. I'm conscious of your camera. I'm going to try really hard not to move too much. Parenting, raising young people, it involves a series of ongoing conversations for many, many, many years across a broad range of topics. And so for this to work, whatever framework you come up with, it's going to require ongoing discussion and reminders with your children. So it takes a young person a lot of repetition, a lot of discussion and reflection in order for these conversations to make sense to them and to be relevant to them. And for a young person to really do anything we say, particularly the age group we're talking about here, once we're looking at social media and device and technology, we're talking about the tweens and the teens mostly. But if you happen to have any stray younger ones, now's a great time to start having these conversations long before they're on the devices, because it is so important that it's clear in their mind that, like all of the other beautiful skills you've taught them across their lifetime, social media and device and technology use is also a skill. It's an ability that you develop with time and practice, and because they are highly addictive. And we know this. That they're designed to sound like this irresistible pull. It is very, very hard to ignore the sounds that come off a mobile phone, and it engages you instantly, because the really clever people who are far more tech savvy than Catherine and I found just the right sounds, just the right lights, just the right buzzers for human psychology to respond to it, for us to respond as a species to technology and social media in a way that we find it incredibly difficult to put it down and ignore it. Very clever and not easy to manage by any means as parents, because at that time that our young people become addicted and seeking it out, they're also at a time where they're developing their own sense of identity and who they are, which is a very healthy function of development, but a total pain when we're talking about something that's so highly addictive and enticing to them. So at that age, when we're trying to have this influence on our children, they are also trying to show us, I don't need your assistance, thank you very much. I got this. I know everything now. And you can't make me. And this is our challenge, isn't it? And so you know, I have children as well, so I'm in the trenches with you, our oldest being 14 and our youngest is 6. And so it's always in my awareness at work and as a mother that they need our leadership, but they have to accept our leadership. So the buy-in, we have to find a buy-in with our children to get them to listen to us at this age about something they're hooked on. And the buy-in, there's a few, and we'll discuss them tonight, but it's the conversation involving our children and talking to them just like we would talk to our friends or our partners if we had a problem or they had a problem. It's a reciprocal, respectful discussion that isn't charged with control or anxiety, even though we desperately need a sense of control over this. We love our children more than anything, and we want them to be okay. And that intense love that we all feel for our children also means that we can go a little bananas sometimes, right? And the conversations aren't always as reciprocal and calm as we want them to be for any of us, or is that just me? It's all of us, right? And so it's really crucial that we forgive ourselves for that as well, because just like they're learning how to manage themselves, we're learning as parents how to parent that age group, how to parent this new challenge. Do you remember when they were little and you actually thought I felt like, this is completion because my children are now all toilet trained. It's all so easy now. It just keeps going. The hits keep rolling because, of course, human development, until our children are about 25, their brains are really underdeveloped and their impulsivity is higher than it is after 25. Their executive functioning, their ability to be organised and plan and regulate their emotions is also very vulnerable and underdeveloped. And so, of course, they lose the plot. And you see, when they lose the plot over wanting to use technology and not being able to use technology and all the discussions, if you can call them that, there's a storm, right? In our homes, there's an emotional storm that explodes. And a tween and teens emotional storm can be really emotionally taxing for us as parents. It's actually also really taxing for them. But when we look at this, and the reason I'm showing this is just a gentle reminder to all of us to forgive ourselves for all of those times that you've responded to that emotional storm with your own little emotional storm. Because emotions are contagious. We get them from our children, we give them to our children, and the cycle continues. And there are studies all around the globe that talk about the contagion of emotion. And we know this because every time we engage with another human being, we get a feeling, right? We can feel what they're feeling. And we're designed to do that. That's what's so beautiful about being a human being, is that we feel, we sense We're really in there in this life together. And as parents, you know, we are living with people who are 20, 30, 40 years younger than us. And what that means is their experience of life is very different to our experience of life. So our tolerance for their emotional storms, because you see we're at a different stage of development, and what really bothers them, for us, we know, oh, really? Really? It's this bad, putting on your shoes? Really? Because we know about all your life. We've lived for longer. So just bear this in mind, that when we're looking at teaching our children the boundaries around this, it needs to be delivered with calm and reciprocity. So try not to have these discussions when you're feeling agitated, because they will not listen. Because then we're absorbing and taking the emotion, and then we're returning it, and they will they will pass it back. We just go back and forth. It's not really the kind of reciprocity we're looking for. So it's really important we remember this. And look, who finds it easy to regulate their emotions as a parent? I'm guessing no one, right? Are we all peaceful and zen-like all the time? No, I'm certainly not. And it's a daily conscious intention and a daily practice to just be a teensy bit better the next day at regulating around emotional dysregulation. It is very difficult, so we have to be very understanding of ourselves. Think about that Australia's Funniest Home Video show. You've all seen that. Some of you are as old as me, you remember it. I think there's some reruns on something. Anyway, you're watching it, and you know something bad, but not terribly bad, but bad enough that like the funny bad is about to happen. So you're watching it and you're happy, it's all good, and then boom, you know, someone bumps into something or falls off something. And immediately you go, oh. And what's happening in that moment is your mirror neurons in your brain are having this lovely reciprocal exchange, this empathic exchange with what's happening in front of you, as if you're going through it yourself. And that is why, parents, that when we have a chaotic person in front of us, an emotionally dysregulated person in front of us, we react just like that until we learn the art of regulating our feelings, and that is work in itself. But it is perhaps one of the greatest gifts we get from our children. So remember, as we look over these slides tonight, that having these conversations with our children is going to trigger emotion in them and trigger emotion in us. And if you're a little bit unlucky, along the way, they're going to stuff up. They're going to stuff up on social media. They're going to stuff up with their devices. They're going to lie to you. They're not going to be completely truthful because they're children and they test and push boundaries. And they're imperfect. We're all imperfect. But it's really hard when your brain hasn't finished like wiring properly for impulse control, right? And that moment of anger when they read something and it infuriates them and they can't pause, they have to respond right away. We've all had that moment. But we have the common sense as neurologically developed citizens to have enough emotional regulation and impulse control to not react. And we want them, when they make these mistakes, and hopefully the conversations that will come from our discussion tonight will reduce the number, but when they make the mistake, we are still there for them. They're still young. They're still living with us. And it's a perfect time to show them that you can keep talking about this and that your loving arms are there to receive them and you're there to help them reach the right direction to get back on track. Because if we become enraged and upset every time they break the rules or do something impulsive and super silly, and it's hard, isn't it? Because devices and social media are permanent fixtures. Like, it's there. Once it's there forever. It's never deleted, right? It's always searchable. And we'll talk about that online reputation shortly. But this is important to keep in mind, that we choose the opportunities to have this conversation. And when you find that you're agitated or they're agitated, you just make sure you pause and you try again another time. And when they do come to you with a mistake, we want to try and respond as calmly as we can, even though we are freaking out on the inside. Right? It's an art. It's a skill, right? It's a skill, and we can learn it. We know social emotional intelligence is teachable, and that's a social emotional intelligence skill we need to learn as parents. It's so good for our health as well, and it's so good for our relationship with ourselves and our children, because we all feel guilty when we haven't been able to regulate well. And then we tell our children when they make those mistakes, we say things like, there is nothing so bad that you can't make a comeback from this. Because children are so, the kids I work with, when they make a mistake, whether it's a social media mistake, whether it's that they've lied to their parents about being on social media that they're not meant to be on, that they didn't have an agreement, all the things that go wrong, right? And they are devastated they stuffed up, and really upset they got caught and don't know how to make it better with their parents. So we must always remember that when they're young and they're learning and they make their mistake, they are feeling just as bad as we are about it. It's just it comes across with immaturity from them. And it might even look like they don't care, because it's their dignity that they're trying to hold on to. And there's a reason why they get impulsive. It's just everyone else is doing it. Everyone else is on this. And peer pressure is a real thing. I was telling a girl today, and I was counselling her, and she was so really struggling with not having a phone. And all of her peers have got a phone, and she's 15, and it's hard. And for her, it's like social comparison is really tricky at that age. And you want to fit in and have the same things. So when that's the case, if your boundaries are different to other families' boundaries, there's no point explaining why. They know, right, that your boundaries are, that's your family values, and they need those boundaries and your family values reflected. And sometimes they'll follow and sometimes they'll rebel. But all they need to know is that you empathise with just how hard it is that they do not have the thing that they've asked you for. And when we show that empathy, when we're able to say to our children, you really want a mobile phone, and you are the only person in your year, I'm just picking mobile phone, just exchange it for whatever thing is your child is the only child, which they're not. We all know they're not, are they? Like if we all sat down in a sec, wrote our kids' ages down, we'd all just go, all right, it's actually that one kid is the only kid who's got that, and none of our kids have. But it's how they talk, it's how they manipulate us into thinking that, they put us on alert, and they're a bit scary, aren't they, when they're emotional? So then we just get into this cycle. But when they do come to you with that, for our deep connection with our children, so that we can have them listen to us most of the time, none of them listen all the time, but most of the time, it's our connection with them that is the thread that keeps those conversations strong. So what we want to be able to say to them is, you really want a mobile phone, and I can see how sad and upset this makes you, and I do understand. And so it's not that they go, look, thank you so much for your empathy. I am now just so at peace that I'm the only person on earth who doesn't have this thing, right? They're just keeping mad at you. But what's happening at a deeper level is they know you understood their pain. And that is our best relationships, is it not? In our life, the best relationships are with the people who show us empathy and understanding. They don't have to agree. And it's better when they do realise we're right, but they don't have to agree. But we want to know that they understand. So we take care with the storm. Or we just bury our head in the sand. I mean, sometimes I just want to do that. Sometimes I just feel like, the mental load of parenting and all of the things that we have ongoing. I talked about this on YouTube last week. It's just ongoing. There's a lot of information. Even now I'm speaking to you and I am thinking about social media, but I've also realised that there is washing in the washing machine. And the likelihood of anyone other than me in that house noticing that cycle has come to an end is quite limited. So that is also on my mind, and I've now told you about it. And sometimes, I just don't want to think about it. I just don't. I just feel like I just want to take a vacation from all this responsibility. 14 years ago, I was footloose and fancy-free. I only had to worry about one person who was a fully formed adult. It was really quite straightforward. But none of us would exchange it for the world. And it's such a privilege that we got to be parents, but it is so exhausting. And so sometimes we just want to bury our head in the sand, and that's okay too. And all we can do is when we have the emotional energy, and so many of us run off an emotional deficit as parents, because the last thing we make time for is our self-care and our well-being. But if we do bury our heads in the sand for too long, we get to the point where they're not listening and they're already hooked in and they've already made some really ugly mistakes. So we want to get on top of this when they're young and have these conversations as soon as we can. And we don't want to catastrophize either. Right? Because everybody freaks out, The world is freaking out about social media and devices and technology, and our children are ruined, and this is the end of society as we know it, and we all have a jolly good conversation. The conversations we heard when we were 10 and 15 and went, listen to those old people talking about all of this stuff like it's the end of the world. It's the same conversations just 20, 30 years later, right? We want to keep this in context because the reality is it is here to stay, and there's going to be more and more of it. And for our parents, the difference was they were trying to deal with it with TV. I mean, we only had 3 stations, so it wasn't as enticing, right? It was like, you know what, I would rather be outside riding my bike than watching these 3 stations. So, of course, it was easier to monitor back then. But it's the same thing. There's always something, right, that our children are hooked into that isn't particularly healthy for them in excess. But there's also some fantastic benefits of technology. And certainly many children with whom I work, who by the end of the day, they are so exhausted as introverts or young people on the spectrum or kids with learning difficulties. They are shattered by the end of the day. And some time on a device is the only way they can really switch the world off. And for some of them, it's the only thing they feel good at. And so that makes the addiction even stronger for them. So we must have boundaries around it, but we must acknowledge them. To get any of this to work, we have to speak to them in their mind before we get to our mind. So how we do that is we say things like, I can see this is how you relax. I can see how good you are at this and how hard it must be to pull yourself away. I didn't have to do this as a kid. I mean, I don't know, I'm showing my age now, but it was like Commodore 64, right? I loved that thing, but again, a bit like the 3 channels, it was really easy to walk away from. The keyboard, usually one of the things didn't work. The enter button, if there was more than one child in the family, would be pretty much depleted quite soon. So again, much easier, whereas now it's so engaging. It's designed to be that way. So always remember, before we give any boundary, whether we're talking about technology or behaviour or anything, we deliver our boundaries with empathy. We show them, I see you, I hear you, I understand you. And it can still be a no, but this develops, it neurologically wires our children for higher levels of empathy, and that is one of the greatest gifts we can give our children, because we know emotional intelligence is crucial for our ability to get along with others, to perform academically, to have a good chance of getting and then keeping the job. And then getting and maintaining a relationship with it, whether it's a friendship or relationships, empathy is crucial, preferably from everyone involved, right? And so when we show empathy, we're also wiring their empathy through the reflection and the exchange that's happening. So all boundaries around social media delivered with empathy are more likely to be heard and taken on board. And the other part of that is to involve them. And I know I touched on this, but then I got sidetracked by the washing in the washing machine. Or whenever we deliver these boundaries and we explain it, we have a reciprocal conversation and ask them, how can I help you with this? Because I love you so much and I'm really struggling that we're arguing over this, if you are. Or I'm really struggling that no matter what we set as the guidelines on this, I still find you sneaking it in or still on it, because it's really hard to monitor them, right? You know, and they need to self-regulate too. And so that's tricky, but it has to be, how can I help you? What do we need to do? Can we talk about this? And however you get their attention, whether it's in the car driving and there's no eye contact, or it's having a milkshake or an ice cream or kicking the ball outside, any way you can get them to listen, because they need us desperately to help them navigate this. They'll act like they don't and they will push you away, but they need us. They need our leadership and our guidance, and they love us so much. You know, every kid I work with in conflict with their parent over this, I will have them in tears over just how hard it is arguing over this stuff, because they want the same thing as us, which is to get along with us and to come up with some agreement. So it's got to be a reciprocal thing. We don't want to panic, although that would be quite entertaining to watch. And we also want to remember that when they do cross those boundaries, whether we're talking social media and technology or whether we're talking about other things, that if they haven't come yet, they're coming, right? This is parenthood, so it's really quite an adventure. We just must not take it personally. Like, because my child did this, or said this, or struggled with this, or didn't follow what we agreed on, or has lied, if we get caught up in taking it personally, that's when we start acting a little bit wonky. Right? Because as soon as we start going, all right, well, first of all, I should have listened to me, or what have I done wrong? Why didn't I do this? As soon as we get into blame mode, whether we're blaming ourselves, our partner, the moon, the child, whatever it is, once we're in this angry state, then that's when we cannot do our best parenting and discussion around it. So we don't take it personally. Our children, it doesn't matter how beautiful you all are as parents. Children will do what children do. They will experiment with boundaries. They will test the limits. They will push those limits and boundaries because they're still learning and growing and developing. And as I mentioned at the beginning, they're at an age where they're really caught up in being their own person. And so at that level of maturity, they think they know everything. And we did too. We just choose not to remember that. Block it out. Don't remember being like that. We will have time for questions, so I'm giving you this framework, and then we'll have plenty of time for us to have a discussion together. So the ideal goal, because they're on it and they're going to be on it, is for them to be digital, to understand digital citizenship and digital leadership, confidence to manage their online reputation, safety and privacy, and an ability to know when to walk away and balance their life. And they are massive goals for people who are under 25, which could be you, or we might be talking about your children. So when we're talking about digital citizenship and digital leadership, we want to give them opportunities to really grab the good stuff about technology by the horns, so that the things that they're engaging in are things that are actually more likely to be good for them. So kids are amazing. They're such beautiful beings. You know, when given the opportunity to learn about coding and designing apps and social media pages that are positive and constructive for our world, it's been incredible what I've seen some of the young people that I see do with that. And that's what digital citizenship and leadership is. It's about engaging with the technology and the social media in a way that is fruitful for their growth as a human being. And even better, when we look at the happiness research, the resilience research, we know that we flourish as human beings the more that we extend ourselves out of ourselves in order to be useful and helpful to others. We are designed to be helpful and kind and compassionate and generous. And when we practice that kind of life as much as possible, we actually feel happier and it improves our resilience. So this might be a new way of baking the cookies for the person down the road, or helping the person who's injured and can't mow their lawn and going in and doing it. It might be coming up with ways to engage in social media in a way that's fruitful for them and for others. So start looking at your child's value system. What matters to your child? What's important to them? What are your child's strengths? And what might they become interested in order to be a great digital citizen and leader? And have these beautiful conversations, because they're going to be on it. And if they're on it, some of the time engaged in a mission that makes them see that their place in that space can be powerful for great things, how empowering for them, how wonderful for their self-confidence. And that is a gift that we can give them. We can redirect their attention, because we know that when this goes wrong on social media, it is predominantly around the toxicity of some of the commentary that happens between same age or different age kids, just conflict, right? Because they're impulsive, or they read something and misunderstand it because they're young and they're still learning. And it's hard, isn't it? You know, face to face, we sense everything. You know, when I was back in school and high school, you know, the phone was connected to the wall in the kitchen. So it would ring, and there was, you know, parents around and siblings around and life around, and that became your moral compass constantly in the room. It's like isn't it? A subtle reminder, because we always behave better when we're being watched. I mean, sure, we're all aiming for that lovely integrity thing where we behave well even when no one's watching, but we know from the research that generally speaking, we do a little bit better when there's a bit of an audience. And so it's the same for our young people when they're sitting alone and they're texting and they're mad and their brain is like 12 years old or 15 years old. So not much life experience, a lot of emotion about things that matter more to them than anything, which is friendships at that time, often. And so in that moment, out comes something and it's done. Whereas when you stuff up in the 70s, 80s and the 90s, you stuff up in the moment with the real person on the other end of the phone, they hear the tone, you make it better, done, boom. No one else is observing, no one else is judging, done. It's hard for this generation. They are really doing it tough. And when we're able to shift the lens and remember that even though we might feel a little disempowered by trying to establish good, healthy relationships with social media and technology and devices, and it's hard because they're not always going to listen, we can always remember to see it from their eyes and remember they don't want to be addicted either. They don't want to stuff up either. They don't want to make mistakes. They don't want any of the stuff that leads to those difficult outcomes. And that will help soften our hearts in those tricky moments as well. Because empathy's the winner. It's like my favourite feeling. It's just so good. Oh yeah, let me not forget the points that I planned. So digital citizenship and digital leadership. Confidence to manage their reputation. Now there's a couple of things I want to talk about here. You know, there's the online reputation. We need to have a conversation, but ask questions. Let's not go in lecturing. It's fun, because we just do all the talking. It's like one-sided, it's straight, here's some facts, here's some information, now listen, take that on board, because I love you. And it's for the best. And it's just like, whoop, in one ear and out the other. So ask questions, you know, what does it mean? Google someone famous that they really like. And look at what that person's online reputation is. Maybe Google first on your own. Right? Sometimes the name that they call themselves by may indicate that you might not want to Google that particular person. What you're doing when you're doing that with them is you're, without lecturing, without talking about them, you're just exploring how real it feels to read about another person you have never met in your life, that is written about all over the place and has a digital online reputation, that even for the people that follow them and like them, it puts seeds of doubt in your mind, doesn't it? It's like when people gossip around you and you're like trying to disengage from it, but then you're like, I wonder if that is true. You can't help it, right? You can't help it. And so we want to explore it in subtle ways. We want to look up, you can look up people you know and Google them and see what comes up. Oh, yep, this is about their workplace, this is about whatever. And start having this discussion early on about the online reputation, because an online reputation is incredibly powerful. And what gets really hard, particularly for some girls on social media who start to develop a bit of an identity for whatever reason, and they become really popular on social media, it's so stressful for them when I talk to them, because they're trying to keep up this image. That's what social media does. Everyone gets an image. If you've got a presence in social media, everyone expects something when they see you. And it's usually much higher than is reasonable or possible, because everything looks better on social media, everything. And so it's important that they understand to try and be authentic and be themselves, or at least be neutral, and not put out something just to please others, and make that really clear early in their life. And then the other thing with online is making sure they know what to follow. Because in that feed, if all they see are their friends, you see in the 80s and 90s, if you didn't get invited to a party in high school, which is actually very normal to not be invited to everything, isn't it? It's normal to not be invited to everything. But you see, our children in this generation, they have it in their face on the social media feed. Whereas we might not even know that that thing had happened, and it just, the visual makes it so much more powerful, because everyone's going to look happy because they're having their photograph taken, right? And so it's so important that in between, that they're not just following friends and celebrities, right? That they're following things that bring them joy, that match their value system. So I often sit with my clients and I go, like, you're so puppy obsessed. I hope you follow puppies and baby animals on Instagram. No, I don't actually. Oh my gosh, you should totally be following puppies. I follow puppies. It just makes me happy, right? These are people that are legally allowed to use Instagram, by the way, and they're on it and they're addicted and they're having a horrible time with conflict. So I'm trying to interrupt their feed with positive, constructive images that take away from the ongoing flood of everything that agitates them. So we want them, if they're into puppies, following puppies, or art, or whatever gets them excited, cake decorating. There's like really, really cool stuff, talented, creative people. And we know when we see an image, that image gives us a feeling. And so we want to make sure they're following a good balance of things. And that's a really important way to help and support their mental health when they are watching, following and using social media. We want to talk to them about the addiction before they're on it, preferably, right? And if it's never too late to have this conversation. It's not. But ideally before you let them on it. And to say, I really trust you with this. I feel like you're really ready. So you show your confidence even if you're freaking out, right? Because they need to know that we are confident in them. And it's an experiment. You can say to them, this is a bit of an experiment for us. This is the first time I'm doing this with a child, with my teenager or however old they are. And be really authentic and open, because that's where we get the most respect from our children, when we show we're not just going, right, this is how it's going to be, or I'm taking your phone away. Because it just doesn't work, and it's not good for our relationships with anybody to engage in it that way, even though it might happen occasionally because, remember the storm thing, mirror neurons, can't help it. It just happens. So we want to ask them, how will you get off your phone? How will you stop being on social media? How will you know when to walk away from a conversation that is making you feel uncomfortable? Ask them. Because the worst time to learn anything is in the heat of the moment. Because, of course, our beautiful children and ourselves, in the heat of any difficult moment in our lives, the thinking takes a little vacation. See you later. Goodbye. No logic left. And the emotions take over. And we get a little hijack and we flip it and we don't behave as well as we could, and we do not think as clearly as we could. So we have to prepare them in advance for those moments when they're sitting there in the heat of the moment and they're just so tempted to just write one more comment and get that last word in, because they know they're right, even though the other person also knows they're right. Because that's it, isn't it? Any argument or disagreement, everyone thinks they're right. And so having that discussion is really, really crucial. And also to know when to say stay safe. I mean, if I just cannot tell you how often kids tell me, oh, and I only make friends with people on social media who are children. So first, when they first get on, it's like, oh, I only befriend people I know. And then when it gets to about the number of about 300, I'm pretty sure I don't know 300 people, right? I mean, I might have 300 acquaintances, but I certainly don't know well people that I'm, welcoming into my personal private space. As soon as we hit that number, you start thinking, okay, how do you know them? Well, he's so-and-so's friend from so-and-so, and they went to a party that they were at, and it's just like, okay, let's reel it back in. And that will just say to them, it's so innocent. They will just be like, oh yeah, I only befriend kids or people that go to my school. You can write the name of your school and put a child's picture up. We all know that. But they're too young to keep that open, because they get this addictive excitement of more people connecting with them, right? Because it's exciting to feel like you've got these people who like you and want to be part of your world. So, poor things, they've got a lot to carry, don't they? So we just talk, we show empathy for that. We ask them, what do you need? How can I help you with this? We reassure them that these are loving exchanges, and they're more inclined to listen. And even if they're not listening in a really obvious way, what's happening on that deep subconscious level is the relationship with you is staying as intact as possible over a difficult time. And that is gold. This is the best thing we can have, are good relationships, particularly within our family and also outside of that family. And on that topic of connections, we know that human relationships are it. And we know with young children, the best way to learn social emotional skills is through face-to-face exchanges. And so we do hold off these things as long as we can and monitor it as long as we can. The best contact with another human is with another human in front of you. But in saying that, remember, in your family, you might have a child who is so introverted or so shy that they're going to get some of their best contact when they're having an online friendship. And I have lots of kids that I work with who rely on those too, and they have much deeper conversations that way because they're not so busy just trying to regulate themselves because they're in the room with another person, right? So again, you think about your family and make it make sense for your family and what works for you. And that is really crucial. So when we're looking at relationships, it's really important that our children, because they're now engaged in these things, that they're spending enough time around other people. We're giving them a whole life. Technology is not bad, right? But too much technology is. So finding that whole experience of life where they're moving enough, engaging enough with others, listening to enough music, and laughter and joy and experiences that are enriching for your well-being. And that whole life makes it so much better when they're engaging with technology, because it's not the only thing that's on their mind front row centre. So we want to make sure also that our children have lots of relationships outside of school, meaning friendships outside of school, right? So we want to make it clear, when we look at what's healthy, it's important to not have all your eggs in one basket. So if most of your friends are from your school or from your sport, then if something goes wrong in the friendships, whether it's by social media or whether it's by any other means, because kids are socially clumsy in general, right? They stuff up a little bit. They don't mean to, but it's just the nature of being a young person. And so when things are going wrong, they need to know, I've got other people. I've always got people and connections. So keep that in mind, particularly once they start using social media. And then if you see they're having a hard time on it, that's when you help them reconnect with real life friends and in other environments, because children do very well with space from each other when they're in conflict. Compromise is the ideal, that they sit down and have a restorative discussion with another child and work things out. But at the end of the day, that's actually really tricky for you under 25, because you're still neurologically learning how to cope with this stuff. Often just a bit of space, a bit of time before they come back to repair the relationship works a treat as well. So relationship with us, we nourish that so that they, first of all, feel great, but also so they're more likely to listen to us. So that relationship is crucial. And explaining to them that having a mobile phone up, if you came here for slides, it's not my thing, by the way. Can you even read what that says? You can, okay. Fuzzy. It's really important that they really understand the purpose of why we regulate the way we use our mobile phones, because a lot of the time, none of this stuff occurs to them. Like, we know how rude it looks. Like, if I went out to dinner with a friend and they had the mobile phone on the table, I just wouldn't feel very great about that, because it's saying, unless, they were expecting an important call, in which case I would understand. But if they're doing that and they're glancing over and they're checking and they're always aware, then you know that in that moment you don't matter so much. And human exchange, that reciprocity, that's how we thrive as a species, is through those beautiful connections with each other. So we explain that what it says, if you're holding a phone in your hand, what it says is, nothing is more important than this thing in my hand right now. So when you come and interrupt me if I'm on this, or you're trying to have a family discussion and one of your kids is sitting on the phone, they need to understand that that gives the message that the person doesn't matter. And what's really important to develop strong relationships with others is we like to know we matter to that other person. And in that moment that we're with them, they're with us. So we help them understand that, and we provide good leadership and role modelling as well. And if we feel addicted or we're struggling, we do our best to do the right thing, so that it's not a matter of do as I say and not as I do. So we want to explain everything and why. Hi, my name is Amanda and I haven't looked at my phone for 58 seconds. So as we wrap this up before we go into question time, we want to see ourselves as a bit more like a consultant, a bit like I've talked about this tonight. This is like a consultant role. It's like, here's a framework, here's some information, now use your excellent brain to see how this works for you. And when we are interacting with our children in that way, we're more inclined to gain their respect and to have a really fruitful discussion. When we go into control mode, because none of us want to be controlled, it's not fun to feel controlled. And so when we go into the managerial role, where we're basically saying, here's how it is, this is what needs to happen, boom, they switch off. We all switch off. We're designed to not feel comfortable with that. So if we look at our role a little bit like that through all of this, that will be a very helpful thing. And make sure that we're having conversations about social media and technology and device use instead of debates, where it's just a back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's just not good for any relationship. And it's not what we want to wire them for the way that they deal with difficult, uncomfortable conversations. And this is the other thing I must say. I was working with some young people on this topic, but presenting it to kids. Really quite convenient, just use the same slides. No, I didn't. But, we were having this conversation and we were just talking about, being on social media and interacting on social media. And I've actually completely forgotten what I was going to say. It's going to come back to me. But I was having a great conversation, and now you're going to miss the really important point. I'll write it in a note, maybe in the chat box. I'll pretend that I'm in the audience. It will come back to me. And this is something, there's Dr. William Strude, who's someone over in the US, a psychologist in the US. He's got this famous line of, I love you too much, too. And I love that. Because, we talked about the buy-in. We talked about, to get them to listen, we've got to start with empathy and connection. We've got to go close to them. We've got to show that we're speaking with love and care and compassion and empathy. And just like in our very best relationships, whenever anyone talks to us with love and care and compassion and empathy, we just fall that little bit deeper, more in love or like with them. And it's the same thing for our children. So I love you too much to argue about your device. I love you too much to nag about social media. I love you too much to fight over when it's time to get off your device. So that's a nice opening to then have a reciprocal discussion about what you guys can try to make it work. And that keeps our relationships healthy and strong. We want them to come to their own realizations, because whenever we are the expert, and look, ultimately in parenting, we're preparing them for when we're not here. As in, we're here, but they're not living in our homes anymore. We're preparing them so they have an inner confidence that they don't need us to give them the answers, that they can look within, and that they can make some reasonable decisions most of the time. So we're preparing them for that. So we want them to read the social media rules, read the fine print. What do you think of it? Did you know that nothing's actually really deleted on that? So when you delete that, they still own it. Did you know that? What do you think of that? Do you think that's fair? Tell them. You know how when you're looking at something, you're going to buy something, right? And you type in dishwasher or whatever it is that you're looking at, and you might just do it once, and then you get on social media or you get on your computer and all that's coming up are ads for dishwasher. It's incredible how quickly, it's designed to be able to pick up what we're looking to purchase, and you get flooded. So talk to them about that. Tell them that the way it all works actually restricts what starts to come into your feed. And you want choice and control over what comes into your feed. So ask them what they think of that. Have these open discussions about it. Be curious. Ask them what they're watching and looking at. without judgment. So if they're following something you don't feel comfortable with, soak it in, take some diaphragmatic breaths, keep calm, carry on, and then when your rational brain comes back on, think about how you can have a reciprocal discussion with them. We talked about the online reputation. Talk early, talk often. It's like the life education conversation, you know, birds and the bees, whatever you want to call it. It's not just one conversation. Nothing is just one conversation. We want to make this part of the things you discuss as a group, as a family, as people in a relationship together. So we talk early, we talk often. We're there with warm, friendly arms to receive our children in those times that they fall and they make the mistakes. Now is still a good time. You know, I don't know if I've got it on this, but I will certainly share it with Catherine to add. But I have this little thing, and it doesn't look fancy or anything, as you can see. There's nothing fancy going on here. It just isn't, and that's okay. But I've got these 4 or 5 little tips, right, that I give a lot of the kids that I work with, and we'll be sharing with our own kids, and I've already shared, even though they're not as involved in those things yet. So they're just simple rules about how to engage with technology. I'll have a quick flick and see if I've got them on here rather than... No, I forgot, sorry. So I will share that, and then if you can share it with the people that are with us in the live stream. So just tips about anything you put in writing about another person. It's got to be something you would want to read about yourself. And if you don't want to read that about yourself, don't write it. And this is such common sense, but these simple rules, they hold them like, okay, I've got them. I've just got to follow those. And there's 3 or 4 others which I'll share with you, Catherine, that you can share with the community. So giving them these guidelines and saying, this is basically what's going to keep you out of trouble, right? If you're talking about another person, make sure it's complimentary and you're saying something positive. And if you're feeling really upset about something, keep your mouth closed. This little slide here, this beautiful slide here that I've prepared for you tonight, is just a reminder about having these discussions as a group, as a family, and family meetings. Some people have those family meetings where they catch up every week and they look at the problems of the family, and the first time they have one, there's like 497 items and complaints of all the things that they need to discuss, and then it reduces within a year or 7. The idea of a family meeting, and it's an evidence-based tool around, you know, that connectivity within the home, and also teaching our children problem-solving skills and a confidence in their capacity to be in control to some degree of their life. And all it is you get together and you talk about whatever is not working. And then the kids come up with the ideas of how to solve the problem, and then you test the idea out for a week, and if it works, beaut. If it doesn't, you go to the next thing on the list that you want to try. And starting those family meetings or discussions, you know, with compliments and making them really positive, and you might eat something that everyone loves to eat, or just whatever keeps everyone engaged. And it's like any good organisation talks about things. There's not just one expert that is in the leadership role that just tells everyone, well, this is how it is, because I am going to tell you all how it is, because I know everything. A good organisation operates from the expertise of everyone in that organisation and focuses on everybody's strengths and abilities and the leadership, the person in that role. I mean, someone takes that role in an organisation, but that person always seeks the input of the team for their expertise so that they too can have some leadership in the organisation or the company. So we're teaching our children, you're capable, you have expertise. When they're talking to us about social media, we want to get them a job. No, we want to just use reflective listening. So we don't want to start throwing our opinions, our judgments too much, or we lose them. So reflective listening is simply hearing what they have to say and in your own words stating it back to them and saying, I just want to make sure I've understood this. So what you're telling me is you've just posted this thing, whatever it is that they're telling you, and you just have this discussion. You don't add anything new, and you show you care this way, but that you're not the expert, because ultimately our children need to become the expert in their life. They need to know they can handle problems without you having all the golden knowledge. So of course we know more because we've lived longer, only a little longer, but we've lived longer. And so we have this, but we're handing it over to them every time something's difficult to get them to start churning and thinking it through. Like, what do you think will help? What do you think we should do about this? And every time we do that, we're gifting them with a confidence within themselves that they are capable of coping with whatever challenge comes their way. And you will provide support and compassion and empathy and advice when asked for. Right? And sometimes we're not. Because, you know, like the mirror neurons and the emotions and the impulse control is still a problem after 25, let me tell you. So it's just a little reminder. I always tell people, you know, the reason I chose the baby slide is everything with gaffer tape over someone's mouth would probably have given you nightmares. But it really is indicating sometimes the best thing we can do is just keep our beautiful mouths closed. Right in those parenting moments when you're feeling really challenged by whatever's being hurled at you, you don't take it personally. You know you're right, of course, but you don't take it personally. And what you do is just imagine you have gaffer tape over your mouth and it's really tight. It's so tight you can't say anything until you breathe and you regulate yourself enough to a state of enough equilibrium that your prefrontal cortex, that the thinking part of your brain has switched back on and is now able to perform at a reasonable level. So just keep that in mind as we navigate all of this together. So if you would like, so before I take questions, we'll have plenty of time for you to ask me some questions. If you're looking for any information, I've got lots of free resources on my website, and that's the webpage. And I just started a YouTube channel to give tips to parents and educators and young people, so I talk to kids as well. About once a week I manage to grab a moment and I talk about different topics like how to keep calm when your children aren't, and how to support your children with their emotions as well. So that's under my name, not under the company name. And I have some books here, and that's all of them. And that little image there, the scan code, is that what they're called? I don't know. That black and white thing. If you scan that, that will take you to the different social media pages where I post tips. It doesn't subscribe you to anything. It is literally, I'm just trying to give out as much information as I possibly can that is useful. So time for questions. So anyone have any? Thank you for listening for such a long time. It's been so lovely, your smiles and your encouragement. You've been such a lovely audience, lovely people to have in a room this evening. So questions, and there's a chat box too, Catherine. So, okay, lovely. Yes, so if you're watching on the live stream, please, we haven't forgotten about you, so feel free to send some questions through and I will do my very best to answer them. But if I don't know how to, I will say I don't know. With the what, sorry? We don't always have the most positive conversations in our house, and sometimes I have particularly one strong child that won't listen to anything. She will, however, listen to other people or potentially somebody on YouTube. And I'm just wondering if could I chat to her on YouTube? I just don't think I'm the kind of YouTuber that your child's going to want to follow. It's very hard. Yeah. Do you know why that is, though? You know, our children are often the worst for us, right? You know, as a rule of thumb, if our kids are generally getting along with their peers and doing okay at school and in public most of the time, you're doing really well, right? When they come home, the guard is off. They have to let out their day. And humans as a species are very good at dumping their emotions on others. Right? We just are, until we learn to do better, until we learn to regulate and manage our stress and our emotions better. That's why siblings, like whenever my clients are having a tough time, I know I feel for that sibling in that moment because I know what's going home that night for the other kids. So we put those emotions on the people we feel safest with whom to do that. So the other thing is it's not that she's not listening to you. I mean, I know it physically, on the tip of the iceberg, the behaviour looks like she's not, it's a she, isn't it? She's not listening to you. It's really that, how old? This one. There's more, isn't there? Two. And again, you know, she's right at that age of, I need to develop my own identity and sense of me knowing the best. So whatever you've got for me, nah. But they are listening, and we can't take that period of time personally. We've just got to remember, and look, some kids, the less we talk, the better, right? And so we have conversations like, I love you too much to be arguing over this. So how about we just spend as long as it takes for this sand timer to come to an end to just see if we can reach a solution. How can I help you? Getting them to talk and contribute to the discussion, showing it's coming from a place of love, that can get you some buy-in. But different personalities, they all come out like, you know, I have friends who are midwives and they're like, they know, they can see they work with babies, right? They're like right there. They're just like, good luck with that one. Oh yes, you know, all the best to you. Good luck, right? The temperament is like, it's strong in certain personalities, and we don't want to stamp that out either because they're great leaders with excellent determination and all of those things. And look, with your daughter, always encourage in any time of discipline, you know, when you're not getting cooperation, to focus on what your child's strengths are that are driving that behaviour. So even though it might sound unusual, and if I had more time I'd go into more detail, but generally speaking, you know, when she's not listening and she just wants to do it her way, even, you know, she's probably really determined and really knows what she wants, right? It's a positive way to put it. There'd have to be a positive spin, right? And whatever that positive spin is, because I don't know her, but I'm just going to, let's just pick determination and just say, you know, I love your determination. And this is still a no. And so you can have your boundary, but remember, when we deliver a boundary, we deliver it with empathy. And if we deliver it with a strength focus initially. So anything like that, right? So anything that happens like that, we do have to tell them when they've done the wrong thing. We do have to have boundaries with our children. It's not healthy for them not to have boundaries. But when we develop it with a compassionate understanding that they are in fact just still learning, they know that we've understood, because they're just embarrassed. Every time they stuff up, they're embarrassed, like we are. Isn't it? Don't you feel mortified if something you've said or done is misunderstood? And it's like a horrible feeling, and it's the same for them. So I know that's not a complete answer because I don't know her, but hang in there. And I'll see what I can do. I mean, if I could cut pizzas and talk. But I do chat to kids about different things, and I try to keep it short. And I am, you know, developing more things like that, because families will often say, I just wish I hit record on that session I sat in with you because I can't remember what you said. So I am trying to put more of that, and hopefully that will start coming on there, because, you know, I want to be a YouTuber like all of the other kids. Okay, another question? Thank you for that. Yes, hi.
I think many young people, they, in terms of screen time, they do actually want to do other things.
Mm.
Whether it's help out the family, or grab a bike ride, walk the dog, take a CBC, do homework. But that addiction thing that you talked about,
Yeah.
They just obviously find it hard to leave that screen, whether it's social media or gaming is really huge.
Yes.
So, do you have any practical suggestions that can help young people to get to that point of self-regulating like you're talking about?
Yeah.
It's not that they don't have the will, they actually, you can reason with them and they
Yes.
do these other things, but once they're in the moment, either on that phone or on that game, time could just go on forever.
It's such a great point that you've raised, and I can see lots of people nodding their heads. Oh, can't hear Ben. Okay, no, it is Ben, isn't it? Is that right? Do I remember that right? From an hour and a half ago. So one of the questions are it's recognising that young people genuinely do want balance in their lives, so they really do want to be able to step away from their phone. They do want to have a whole life and be engaged in other things, but the pull of gaming and social media and technology and device use makes it really difficult for them to pull away. So the question is, do you have any strategies for that, and what would you suggest? And it's such a fantastic, I hope I reframed that okay for you. So that is so important, and the fact that you recognise it, and you might remember a little earlier on, I talked about beginning with that empathic discussion where you just say to them, it must just be, you're so good at gaming. You know, time just disappears when you're gaming or, you know, replaced with whatever they're doing. It must be really, really hard for you. What do you think we can do so you can enjoy yourself in those other things? So that's part one. The next part are those boundaries as a family where you establish with empathy first and make it really clear that in your family, device use, gaming, social media are in fact privileges. And there's something that's just the privilege of even having a roof over your head and electricity and Wi-Fi and an opportunity to do that. Not with the lecture that comes with, and there's people around the world who are, we don't need to have that one. But what you're doing is you're making it clear that privilege needs to be earned, and it's earned through movement, looking after our physical health. So we know to survive and be healthy, we need to move every day. And it doesn't have to be the gym, it doesn't have to be traditional movement, but we have to move. We're designed to move for at least half an hour or so a day, quite vigorously. So have that discussion and say, look, I want you to enjoy these things, but I need you to be healthy. And in our family, we do not access devices and technology and television until it's not just movement, it's also education. And we know that education is, we want them to get as much education as they can in whatever form that is for your child, but we know that it puts them at an advantage. So we express our value system, that education, contribution to the home. Again, it's a privilege to have a home. And we know that families that expect chores and engage in chores unfortunately have to usually do them together because otherwise they just forget what they're doing, depending on the ages, and get distracted. But it is important for the sense of connection within a family that everyone contributes, and nourishing food. So and whatever matters to you. I mean, I've just pulled out of my own head. So that's the strategy. There's no magic wand. It's an ongoing discussion over many, many months and years, and ideally before. For me, I always encourage parents who are starting to think about letting their kids have a phone or be on social media to have a discussion and say, how will you walk away when it's time to stop and you are right in the middle of something, or you're having so much fun and you don't want to go to that thing? How will you walk away? And use that word, earlier I said it's an experiment. That's what I say with lots of things with my kids. It's just like, this is an experiment. Let's just see if it works for our family. So let's have a go for a week. Let's see if we can all stick to what we think we're going to do, and then let's regroup and discuss it. This is not a permanent agreement. We're just having a crack at this to see if it works. So that takes the pressure off. You haven't got, all right, here it is. Here's the phone, and now off you go. So I wish I could give a definitive path, but the path is really having this reciprocal discussion with our children that really respects exactly what you've pointed out, which is that they do want a whole life. It's ugly feeling hooked. We know when you spend too much time, and we know that it's not healthy to spend too much time. It increases your anxiety, your stress. It makes it very hard to unwind and fall asleep. So they don't want that feeling, but the pull is intense, isn't it? We know. I mean, I'm guessing you know, I certainly know. There's a pull there. Whether it's work-related and you just want to deal with whatever's going on there, or whether it's just for the sheer fun. It is fun being on social media and on technology. And so, yeah, that's all I have. Hopefully that's helpful. Anyone else in the hello live stream people? Any other questions there? We have one here. No, we're good. So we'll take this as our last question. Please go ahead. Oh yes, let's jump on that one. Yeah. Really? I'm pretty sure we can all relate to some degree. You're not alone. It's all good. Yeah, cured. Cured. It's normal. I know. We could just talk all night. There's just so many things to discuss, aren't there? Look, with chores, it's not just focus. They're boring. Aren't they? I mean, I'm not pumped to go and hang up that washing load when I get home. Right? But it's possible everyone will be asleep and I will be hanging up a washing load at 9 o'clock at night when I get home. So it's not just that, but focus is also part of it. And it's again comes back to that discussion. So we're always discussing, not always, but we discuss this stuff as a family. For me, as a parent, it's like, okay, well, there's heaps of things that need to get done, and we also want to do all of these fun things together. So how do we share the responsibilities of the house and divide the labour? That division of labour conversation is a conversation we need to have. And it's good for them in the future because they'll be heaps more fun to live with if they pull their weight. And so with a child that also has challenges with their attention and focus, checklists are great. Notes are great. So just writing a list of things, or they create it. How old is your child? 11. And a boy or a girl? Boy. And so we know with boys and wiring that, you know, the heart is so beautiful and well-intended, but they do get a little bit distracted. Like it can just be from walking from here to there. And they're just like, oh, there's an insect on the wall. And then, gee, I might go and look up in that insect, see if I can work out what it was. They'll go off to get their shoes. And then they come back, 15 minutes later, no shoes, but they can certainly tell you what the name of that insect is on the wall. So for that distractibility, I think visual is always good. We know children respond well to visual information, and it's like a permanent reference point. And the thing I love about visuals, even if you've got littler kids and they're struggling to get ready and organised, usually when our kids are in reception, I always forget. Even with the third one, I still, it's just like, oh, hang on, why is this difficult again? Oh, because the kid is just turned 5 and they've got to get organised and ready for their day, and it's a really big deal and they're tired. So then I would always make this little visual thing that would have everything, and every time they put their shoes on and put whatever, they'd just post away the thing, and it would help keep them on track. And then when they weren't on track, instead of me going, put your shoes on, which then it becomes a negative exchange, and then it becomes an argument, and then no one's listening, and then there's tears and drama. So when the schedule or when the reminders and the notes are the boss, it keeps it warm and fuzzy between you. So it's like, oh, have you checked the next thing on your list? And I've got 15, 20-year-olds that I work with that still operate off that because they get so distracted. You looked horrified. I'm sure that won't be your son. Yeah, how old? And then I've even got some in their 40s. So, but you know, but it's like, I'm so glad you gave me this idea of like a visual checklist. This is gold. I've been using this for 40 years. So I hope that's helpful. And none of them are going to want to do it. So remember empathy, right? So every time I call my kids to do the chores or their homework, it's always like, you're having such a fantastic time. I can see you're having a great time on the trampoline. It's nearly time to do your chores, right? Or it's nearly time to do homework. And again, it's not that, oh, thank you. I'm coming. Thank you for the warning. Thank you for empathy. They're still going to be like, a little bit, because why would you want to come away from something that's fun? But what you're doing every time is you're helping them regulate, because they're preparing in advance. Okay, the fun is coming to an end, but she gets it or he gets it, and they've given me a warning. So it's just ongoing, like for ages. I'll just check finally in the chat box if we have any online friends asking questions. Oh, or they're not what? or they've all gone. I mean, it's one or the other. Oh, they're still there. Hello. Thank you so much, Catherine, and everybody for pulling this together tonight at St. John's Grammar. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you all for coming and spending the evening with me. It was really a joy to be with you tonight. So thank you. Thank you.